How many people here are familiar with Eileen Fisher? Okay, maybe a third. Out of you guys, how many of you have actually been in one of our stores? Okay, just a handful. Well, there's a reason. It's fine. There's a good reason for that. We are an American company, a US-based company. We make women's clothing. This is a picture of Eileen, the founder. She founded the company in 1984, so we're trying to catch up to the FTA. We're always going to be behind a few years. She founded the business. Eileen was not a fashion designer. She actually wasn't really that interested in clothing, but she was having trouble finding clothes that she wanted to wear when she went shopping. So she founded the clothing in order to create her own wardrobe of easy-to-wear, comfortable pieces, always made out of natural fibers. So from 1984, the goal of the company was to make natural fiber clothing that was easy to mix and match. Over the years, we started to try a few different things in terms of our fibers. We would make things out of undyed wool. We would make things out of recycled plastic water bottles. But it was never really central to our mandate. We also, in 1997, joined SAI, the Social Accountability International, and adopted SA 8000, and that became our human rights platform. So we had these two things kind of working in parallel. It wasn't until about 5 years ago when Eileen, after all these years, took her very first supply chain trip. She went to China and she went to Los Angeles. And at that time, she became very struck by what was going on in the world, and suddenly it dawned on her that we were, as an apparel company, contributing to tremendous damage in the world, on the planet, and to the people in our supply chain. We have recently adopted this purpose statement: we grow clothes, we grow people, we grow business for good. This has become our new mandate as of just the last few years. I should also mention, we are a certified B Corporation, for those of you who are familiar with that movement. I think there are about 2,000 B corporations in the world in 40 countries. That means that we now have adopted a true mission within our DNA to bring benefit to the environment and to society, along with to our bottom line. And we are 40% employee-owned, so that's another interesting detail about us. We are not a public company. And just to wrap that part up, we are about a $500 million US company. We have 60 retail stores in the US and London and Canada. So just to give you a kind of a framework, we're not a huge company, but we're considered large according to the business standards. And this is now our operating mandate. I want to share with you a little about how we got here. First of all, about a year and a half ago, when we became a B Corporation, we decided, some of you may know the term triple bottom line company. We decided to be a quadruple bottom line company because we wanted to be able to measure our impacts, not just on the environmental side and kind of the broad social side, but we wanted to be able to measure the impact of our work on our own employees, our employees' well-being, and on the people in our supply chain. But this is where it all started. When Eileen was on that supply chain trip, she started learning about the global water crisis. This map is from 2015, and already, so we're talking 2 years ago, already there's a lot of red on that map. And you know what's interesting about this is the red, of course, represents areas of the world where there's already not enough water. And one can look at that and think about it as a humanitarian situation. Eileen looked at that and said, this is a terrible business dilemma, because when we see that map, we see southwestern California and Arizona. We buy organic cotton from Arizona. We manufacture in southern California. We manufacture in Peru, where we also grow organic cotton for sweaters. We purchase cashmere from Mongolia and manufacture in southern China. We purchase merino wool from Australia. These are all places that are already red on the map. And if we think about our entire supply chain, not just where we manufacture, but where our raw materials come from, and we are 90% agricultural, when we think about cotton, wool, linen, hemp, silk, all the different animal fibers, this becomes a massive business mandate for us. How are we going to survive as a business if there's not enough water to supply the suppliers, the farms, the manufacturers on which our business depends? So we reorganized internally, and I lead the team called Social Consciousness that's been kind of owning this work for many years. But 5 years ago, when Eileen had this kind of epiphany, we decided this wasn't enough. And so we created a cross-functional team in the company. The leader of our design team, the leader of our manufacturing team, the leader of our business operations team, and others came together and created some new goals. And this man represents the kind of the beginning of our supply chain. He's a silk farmer. He's the one who raises the worms who give us silk for all of our China silk. And so this was the beginning of our work to connect our first tier supply chain with our fourth tier, which is the agricultural level. We also began to think about the waste, and not just the waste on the factory floor, but there's going to be a little bit of a theme here. I think you're going to recognize some of this, because we began to recognize that once the clothing leaves our hands and we sell it to our customers, there's a whole new waste stream that we have to actually start thinking about. And many of you who are in apparel know about the waste that we generate. This is a statistic I read recently in Eco-Textile News. The average person buys 60% more items of clothing each year and keeps them for only half as long as 15 years ago. We're buying more, we're keeping it less, and where is it going? It's going to landfill. And that's not sustainable. So we created this new philosophy. This was our ad campaign from about 3 years ago. And the point here is where we came out and said social and environmental injustices are reasons to do things differently. That was actually now our call to action as a company. So that whole team I mentioned, that cross-functional team, worked together to come up with our new goals. It wasn't my team telling the rest of the company this is what's important. It was all of us together saying we need to really take ownership of the materials, the chemistry, the water, and the carbon involved in the manufacture of our product, and also all of our facilities in our everyday life. And we need to look at what are the most significant leverage points on the social side. We had been working in our factories on human rights for 15, 17 years already, and by and large, very little had changed. It was very disappointing. When we would go in and have our factories audited, we would see the wages were basically still minimum wage. Working hours were still very long, despite all the training, despite all the hand-holding, despite all the monitoring and compliance efforts and all the partnerships with NGOs. We were trying to do everything right. So we decided that if we could get to a place where we could actually pay a living wage, truly have strong worker voice in the factories, and elevate everybody's experience so that we call it worker happiness, but so that their total livelihood was strong and had a positive outlook, similar to what we want for our own employees in our company, that would be the foundation for a strong supply chain, strong worker environment in our supply chain. But the one that's unusual in this list is the conscious business practices. And that was the first time we held the mirror up and turned it on ourselves and we said, what is it that we can do differently to enable our suppliers to do a better job? So we were talking about every time we place an order for fabric, then a department store comes and wants a special order from us for 200 special pieces in red, and we've got to go back to the mill and order more fabric in red just for that department store. And then a different department store says, we like that style, but we want it in blue. And we've got to go back to the mill and order in blue. And then we get it going in the sewing, the cut and sew part, and then the designers decide to change something or tweak a collar or whatever. And there are all these changes, and no matter what, it still has to be delivered by the 30th of the month. So we're still paying the factories the same amount of money, but we're asking them to make all these changes and keep spinning. So we realized that we were making it impossible for them to meet their working hour goals, their wage goals. There was a lot of unauthorized subcontracting because they didn't want to tell us that they couldn't do it because they were afraid they'd lose our business. So we're trying to break all of that open. And that one piece, the conscious business practices, is now one of our top 8 company priorities. It has gotten the attention of our senior leaders, and they've created a whole internal workforce. It took us 3 years to get to this point, and it's going to be another 3 years probably until we crack it open. But it's very exciting, and I'd love to be able to come back and share with you how it's going. Just a quick peek at one piece of data, just to show that we are making progress on the materials side. We're just about at 50% eco, which means organic, undyed, certified in various ways. And our goal is to have 100% eco product by the year 2020. So here we go. We are now in the circular conversation. In 2009, 8 years ago, before any of that other stuff happened, we were recognizing that our clothes last a really long time. People pay pretty decent money for our clothes. And we were recognizing, in terms of our employees in particular, we were accumulating a lot of clothes because we get a lot of clothes at a good price in our company. And we needed to kind of make room and clean out our closets. So Eileen decided, let's start collecting the clothes that people don't want anymore, just Eileen Fisher clothes, and see what happens. And let's try reselling it. Let's see if there's a market. And lo and behold, it became so popular, we expanded it to our customer base. And this was the beginning of actually engaging our customers in this conversation. A lot of this work had been behind the scenes, us taking responsibility. But in 2009, 2010, we decided to ask our customers to bring their clothes back. And we have now created, this was just relaunched about a month ago, we renamed this effort, which had been called Green Eileen, we just renamed it Fisher Found, and now we have the beginnings. We're not there yet. We're not as far as you are, but we're on the path towards circular. So what happens is the customer brings only her Eileen Fisher clothes back to the store. She gets a tiny, very tiny monetary incentive for this, $5 per item. It can be in any condition. I'll tell you, we've over the 8 years we've been doing this, we've collected 800,000 items. We have, we can, out of all of that, we can resell 50% of it. We sort it. 50% of it is sellable, has maybe some small repair. But what about the other 50%? So the other 50% goes into 2 categories. One category is half of that amount gets cut up into replicable designs and remade into new pieces out of using the fabric from the old clothing as the material for the new clothing. That's the category we call Remade. It is actually now a branded label called Remade in the USA, and we created a little factory just to do that. The other half of the 50% that we can't make into anything because it's too torn up, it's stained, it's wretched, we're storing. We've separated it all, sorted it by fabric and color, and we're part of a number of different working groups investing in the technology that will allow the fiber to be extracted and pulped and made into a new fiber. The challenge for us is a lot of our fibers have a little bit of lycra. A lot of our fabrics have a little bit of lycra in them for the stretch, which makes the technology especially challenging. But we're going to get there. I believe we're on the verge of that, and there are a lot of companies, a lot of emerging technologies working on this. It's super exciting, and we call that category regenerated. So when we finally get there, we're going to have the closed loop process. We just launched this website, Fisher Found, it's called, and the tagline, "There's nothing new here." And we're super proud of this. It just launched about a month ago. So this is our first attempt to sell some of these items to the general public. And we're opening a new store in Brooklyn with a focus on the remade product in August. So it doesn't stop there, though. I think what's really interesting about this is we're also playing with some new uses for this kind of raw material that we're cutting out of our old fabric, our old sweaters, et cetera. And we have discovered that we can make some beautiful, almost upholstery-like material because we're felting it together. It's fabulous. we're making wall hangings, we're making pillows, we're making seat covers. So we see a possibility for yet another industry, perhaps in the interior design area, or maybe just straight links of fabric. I did want to mention, I forgot to say, that up to this point, we've earned about $10 million by reselling this clothing. So there is a viable business model. That's not a huge amount of money, but it's an indicator. And when you think that we've only taken back 800,000 items out of 5 million that we manufacture every year, there's a huge potential here. So this year, our focus in terms of advertising is about conscious consumption. So it's getting back to that kind of inherent irony of being an apparel company. Of course, we need to sell some clothes in order to stay in business. We talk internally about how much profit do we really need, how much growth is good for our company. So we have modest goals, but we're not out to take over the world. And we really want to drive home this message with our customers about consciously buying, consciously investing in clothing and taking care of it for its next life when they bring it back. So these are just 2 ads that have gone out recently. And I particularly love this quote, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. We're always doing things our own way. We're always kind of building the bridge as we walk on it. But I have to say this went out on social media the day after the famous announcement a couple weeks ago about the Paris Climate Agreement. And I think that what this has done for us is just made us even more determined to get this right and to welcome others into this conversation and hopefully inspire others to join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.